Hello everyone, and welcome to this Guild Wars 2 video. It occurred to me that I might be a Guardian main, but I've actually never made a video the entire Guardian profession as a whole. That being a guide, the weapons, the utilities, the trait lines, the elite specs in its entirety, ways to play, strategies, builds, all that stuff. So today I wanted to start and finish. I mean, by the time you're watching this, the video is already done, but for me, this will be a very lengthy process. And I'm going to be going over the different components of the Guardian. So let us now switch gears from the core Guardian and move over to the very first elite specialization available to the Guardian profession, this being the Dragonhunter. The Dragonhunter is a Guardian who has honed their magical powers into physical forms to shoot arrows, throw spears, and form shields and wings, and the sort to help fight them and help fight in battle and their allies. And the Dragonhunter takes on a long-ranged damage dealer role with some minor aspects of group support or control. So in the same vein, we'll be starting with the weapon, move over to the utilities, touch onto the profession mechanic, and then end on the specialization itself. So first and foremost, we have the longbow. The longbow's basic shot, also known as puncture shot, will fire an arrow that bounces to enemies behind the target. If an arrow hits a second target, all enemies struck are crippled. I know English. So it's a basic damaging ability that could apply cripple as long as it hits a second target. It's long ranged, 3/4 of a second cast time, pretty standard, but still somewhat impactful if playing it ranged. The next ability is True Shot. Charge up energy, creating a powerful attack that pierces through enemies. This is a big hit, especially considering it will pierce enemies. So it does have AoE potential as long as you're striking enemies in a straight line. The next ability also will show some of the animations. This is the basic shot. This is True Strike. And then we have Deflecting Shot. Fire a missile that knocks back enemies and blocks missiles. This has a ground targeting effect, as you can see here. It's a little weird, but there's like a shield in front, and then you shoot it out, and it creates this big reflective, not actually reflective, but destructive shielding around the arrow, which will actually destroy any projectiles coming at you. It would be interesting if it was actually slightly slower, because the reflection, no, I keep saying reflection, but the missile destruction / blocking, it happens so quickly that it's really hard to get any use out of, but it's mostly used for the knockback now, and it does do a decent chunk of damage, at least in PvE settings. Next, we have the symbol of energy. Fire a slow, not really so slow anymore, arcing arrow that explodes on impact to burn targets and sear a symbol of energy into the ground. This symbol will deal damage, apply vigor, and burning, vigor on allies, burning to enemies. The vulnerability is from the Zeal specialization, so it does not actually apply vulnerability, just to point that out. I'm trying my best here. I've even deselected all the traits. It's really difficult. Okay, so we have the symbol of energy. A really beautiful symbol animation. Finally, we have Hunter's Ward. It's interesting because it's Hunter's Ward, but as you might remember from my previous talk about the ward skills, this is classified as a ward, so it's not technically a ward, but it is. Though it doesn't really matter because Guardian doesn't have any... I think there is literally no area of the game that interacts, augments, or enhances wards in any way. So it's very strange that they have it described on Line of Warding and Ring of Warding as a ward, but not for Hunter's Ward. But let's get on a little bit more of a flatter terrain. And and you'll do a barrage in an area with the final blast. You can see around there the ring. The final blast dealing more damage and creating an area for enemies that they cannot cross themselves. It's not like a ring of warding. It's in fact more of just a personal ward around the individual that prevents them from moving out of the area. It's a pretty nice skill. It's good for the cripple. It's on quite a lengthy cooldown, so definitely use this in appropriate settings. Up, we have the traps, and there's actually an event going on over here. We have the very first trap, Purification. Heal yourself and imbue your light into a trap. Enemies that trigger this trap are damaged slightly, blinded, and are blinded as the light returns to you for a second heal. So you'll place it down, which will heal you for a little bit, but then it creates this this really beautiful art for the trap. If enemies walk into it, an effect will play. Let's get him over here if we can. Come on over here, and we can show off some more combat. So it has a nice light. See, as the break bar damage goes out, we've actually broken him, and now we can final. And it does create, oh, he died already, so that's really sad, but it would create a small ring around him, preventing him from moving away. So that's Purification, the trap. The next trap we'll look at is Procession of Blades. Set a trap that whirls around and damages enemies when struck. On the trigger, you will get Fury, which is a 20% increased critical chance for yourself. So Procession of Blades, place that down. If any enemies walk into it, the blades will erupt. I don't see any enemies nearby per se, but let's go over into a more populated area. This could be it. So we have this trap here, we have Purification, and then we'll put down Procession of Blades for the second showcase. And then the third trap is Fragments of Faith. This will lay a trap, and when it's triggered, will spawn Aegis fragments, which allies can pick up. I think that this is such an interesting support skill that has more potential to be a really good support skill. This is the Procession of Blades, some damage, quite a lot of damage, and the Fury is also nice. And then the Fragments of Faith will explode, and then some fragments here will spawn, and I get Aegis. And then if I can get struck, please. Block, and I can pick up another one. So if there's a lot of frequent attacks, you can get more use out of that by picking up more fragments. But Fragments of Faith is a really interesting ability, and I very much like it. This isn't necessarily a video for me to give my impressions of skills or what I would like to see changed or maybe augmented, but it's a nice skill. It will cripple enemies, and it will give you stability. It's also your stun break trap. Next, we have Light's Judgment. Lay down a trap that creates an area of pure light that reveals enemies and pierces their armor. This has quite a wonderful spell effect. And I wish it did slightly higher damage, though I do notice, and I actually think it's really interesting, cool that for a utility skill, its main function is actually to apply vulnerability. You can see there that we got 22 stacks of vulnerability up. And if the health of the enemy that we were fighting was a little bit larger, we probably could have got that to 25 stacks. Oh god, I accidentally used it. Yeah, so we could have got that to 25 stacks perhaps. There's that Purification and that Blind. We can get that Interrupt, and then a nice True Shot. So that's Light's Judgment. Let's actually switch over to Test of Faith, which is one of the more iconic traps. You will lay a trap that creates a ring of weapons that punish enemies that attempt to cross the threshold. Probably resetting. This will create a trap that will trigger and grant you protection, but also create a ring of swords. Now, if they actually pass through it, they take more damage. Come on, pass through it, pass through it, pass through it, pass through it. No! But you can see there the trap triggered. Its initial damage was 800, so it did do quite a bit of damage. Let me see if I can pop this again. Come on over here. 1076. Come on. There we go, another trap. So what you could do is like weave in and out throughout the trap to get more damage off in faster successions and get more out of it. And the final trap is Dragon's Maw. Dragon's Maw does exactly kind of what it says. It pulls enemies together in the Dragon's Maw, granting you might and slowing enemies, while actually doing quite a bit of damage on its ability itself. Come on over here. No? Okay, well, we'll get these guys. Come into the Dragon's Maw. Boom, big. It did CC them. Let's place the other traps too while we can. I'll pop down a symbol and quite a bit of damage. Even though I'm not really playing it ranged, you can still get quite a lot out of this. Now let's talk about the virtues themselves. So we have the virtue of Justice, Resolve, and Courage. Now we have the Spear of Justice, Wings of Resolve, and Shield of Courage. For the Spear of Justice, and honestly for all of these virtues, I'm not going to bore you with an lengthy explanation of its passives because they're all the same. Spear of Justice will burn foes every few attacks, just like Virtue of Justice. The difference is the active is much more tangible, physical, and impactful. You will throw a spear that will pierce through enemies. You got pierced through 2, I have 2 chains. That will continually pulse flame, burning, and cripple onto the target. There's so many pocket raptors. Let me place all my traps down. More blinds, more blinds. So yeah, what this does is it will throw the spear, it'll latch onto them, reveal them, and it will burn and cripple them. I think when you do trait this into Radiance, it becomes so powerful with just all of the conditions that it's applying and also the flat damage as well. It's quite a bit to deal with. And then you can also pull them with Hunter's Verdicts. This will pull all enemies tethered by the Spear of Justice to you, breaking the link. This ability's recharge is separated from the Spear of Justice. So you can pull enemies every 40 seconds, which I think is really smart because pulls are very strong. But if you want to keep the spear on them for as long as possible to get more burning and cripple and damage effects, that's also a nice strategy. Next, we have Wings of Resolve. Passive is a heal. However, now we can actually use Virtue of Resolve, now Wings of Resolve, as a traversal ability to get out of danger, get into danger, or go to a target area to heal allies. So we will sprout wings and fly to a location. Really beautiful. And to take some falling damage there. It's never fun. And then F3 is Shield of Courage. I really love this ability. It's really interesting, and I would love if more people used it, or traits. I don't know. It's really cool, and I'll have to work around a build someday to focus on Shield of Courage. But you form a big shield in front of you that is positional, blocking all incoming projectile and physical attacks from the front. However, you have to be careful from the side or behind. So let's pop this. You can see a cone of just all blocking. It says it lasts. Oh, it only lasts for 3 seconds. I thought it was last for 5 seconds, but it does only last for 3 seconds, so it's a little short. You do have to be careful with how you use this because it might not last for super long amounts of time, in all honesty. But it does have that added effect because it does everything Virtue of Courage does, even the active. It will grant Aegis to nearby allies, but it also will create a shield in front of you for even more blocking potential. You basically become invulnerable so long as you're being attacked from the front. So those are all the virtues. Now let's talk about the Elite Specialization itself and its traits. So for the minor, we have Virtuous Action, which just gives you everything in terms of your profession mechanics, the trap, the longbow. Next, we have Defender's Dogma. Blocking an attack causes Justice to reach its maximum charge and reduces the cooldown of Spear of Justice. This is a little wordy, but basically all this means is that when you block an attack, your F1 passive will immediately trigger on your next hit. So you typically have to hit 5 times in order to get the passive burning effect, but once you block, your next attack will immediately trigger the passive effect. Additionally, it will also reduce the cooldown of Spear of Justice by 3 seconds, which I guess is nice, but it's on a pretty low cooldown, and if you pair this with Radiance, but this also gives you a reason to not pair it with Radiance, because so long as you're blocking, you're going to get your spear faster. And then finally, Pure of Sight. Deal bonus damage based on your distance to the enemy. 5% damage baseline, but the further you are away, you have a total percentage increase of 15% increased damage. I love these minor traits. I think that these minor traits are almost essential for elite specializations to really solidify what role it's playing. This really tells you that this is supposed to be a ranged damage dealer. I would love if Scourge was like, because Scourge has it where it's like gain increased concentration for more sand shades that you have up. I wish other elite specializations really narrowed and like hammered that point in, because I think elite specializations almost allow the game to have a trinity system. Next, let's talk about the actual selectable major traits. We have piercing light, traps gain reduced recharge, and slow enemies. I think this is really simple and really nice for an adept. Next, we have dulled senses, cripple enemies that you disable. I also really love this because I like that the adept tier is pretty like small in scope and really focused. Next, Soaring Devastation. Wings of Resolve deals an attack upon landing. Additionally, movement speed is increased when Wings of Resolve is not on cooldown. Soaring Devastation is such a fun trait that I don't think people take nearly as often, but your Wings of Resolve will now damage on top of everything. It's not a huge amount of damage, but you also use it for the speed boost increase, because Guardian actually never had a passive speed boost increase. Because they don't have a signet that increases movement speed. But if you take Soaring Devastation, you can get around maps faster and also just gain an advantage, even in PvP settings. Next, Hunter's Determination. Gain Aegis and cast Shards of Faith when disabled. This is your on being controlled trait effect. It's nice. I like it. I don't know if it's necessarily the best, but in competitive modes, it's definitely nice to have for beginners because it will automatically break you out of a stun and spread more Aegis that you or others can pick up. Zealot's Aggression, deal increased damage to crippled foes. Justice's passive effect cripples enemies. Some nice damage and a 1.5 second cripple on your Justice. This is even more damage, so you can really do a lot of damage so long as enemies are crippled. Next up, we have Bulwark. Shield of Courage gains increased radius and duration. So it's much bigger, and it actually lasts for 5 seconds now. This is also really nice. I think this could, if there was one other effect on this, I think it could be really interesting. Or get rid of the duration increase. Just make it baseline, and then say like, if you block while using the skill, you're healed for a small amount, or you gain a small barrier. It could be a little too tanky, but it's definitely nice if you are going to play a lot with Shield of Courage. Much larger and a bit longer of a duration. This is really good for defensive playstyles as a Dragonhunter. Next, for the Grandmaster, we have Hunter's Fortification. Remove conditions when blocking attacks. Receive less damage when you have no conditions on you. The receive less damage when you have no conditions on you is good if you are also really good at cleansing conditions or fighting someone or something that does not apply conditions. The removing conditions when blocking attacks is nice, but overall I think Hunter's Fortification is a little out of place in the Dragonhunter line. Considering that all three of these, all the top line seems to be really focused on traps, but then Hunter's Fortification doesn't really have anything to do with traps. And the name itself seems like it would have to do something with traps, but it doesn't. So it's a little weird, but it's there if you want to do some extra Condi clear and gain some more sustain. Next, we have Heavy Light. Gain stability when disabling an enemy. Deal increased damage to disabled foes. You'll gain 6 seconds of stability every 10 seconds if you disable an enemy. And then when you're dealing damage against a disabled enemy, you will do 15% more damage. This is really good so long as you're doing like the cripples and, you know, enemies you disable, you're crippled, you're doing more damage on crippled, and if they're disabled, you're doing more damage. So it's just a lot of damage, okay? If you want slightly more reliable damage without needing to get a disabling effect on an enemy, you can go with Big Game Hunter. Striking an enemy tethered by your Spear of Justice inflicts vulnerability and increases damage dealt. I love that it gives vulnerability, which increases damage, and then it also says, while also increasing damage. Your tether duration is also increased by 66%. So now your tether duration is 10 seconds instead of 6 seconds. So you can have quite a long duration of Spear of Justice. All in all, I really like Dragonhunter as a ranged damage dealer. They are very versatile in situations. They are pretty prevalent in almost every game mode, I think. They have high damage, their traps are useful, their longbow might not necessarily be as useful, but I think the longbow is definitely better than where it was at previously, and I am always one to be very careful of power creep. So they don't necessarily need to. In fact, they should probably nerf a bunch of other things before they even think of buffing other classes or niche areas. But overall, I really enjoy the playstyle of the Dragonhunter. Hello and welcome to the Firebrand section of this video. Now I'm going to be talking about the second elite specialization to come to the Guardian profession during the era of Path of Fire. We're now waiting for End of Dragons, which everybody expects there to be elite specializations, and I'm 99% sure that there will be. And whenever that comes out, it'll be very exciting. But for now, this is the final elite spec that we have to talk about, this being the Firebrand. The Firebrand is an Elonian Guardian who is a master of lore and tomes and knowledge, utilizing their virtues as tomes, spells charged from mantras, and of course their axe to deal immense burning damage, and also to trade their instant support for more of a casted longevity support playstyle. So first and foremost, let's talk about the weapons. For the Firebrand, Firebrands get the new weapon, the axe. We have Core Cleave, Bleeding Edge, which are just 2 attacks, technically 4 because you summon a magical axe, that deal bleeding damage, and then the final slash, known as Searing Slash, to deal burning damage, a much stronger, harder hitting condition. Then we have Symbol of Vengeance. Cleave your axe into the ground, reducing enemy movement and carving a razor-sharp symbol of vengeance. This will apply damage, and it will grant fury to allies, while also bleeding them and crippling them. There's quite a lot on this symbol, and it's quite a strong symbol if you really think about it. There's 4 effects playing at once: damage, a boon, cripple, and bleeding. And then we have Blazing Edge. Conjure a magical axe to rake your enemies towards you. This is a 600 range pull, which burns and bleeds. And we'll actually showcase this. So we have this Blazing Edge, which pulls them and does burn them. And then this is the auto attack chain here. And then we have the symbol. A very basic ability in terms of its damage output. It's focused on condition damage, and it does have a nice pull. It's really quite a long range pull. Axe is typically best utilized with the torch if you are going for that condition playstyle, and or shield. I have seen shield to be very effective in competitive modes, depending on what you're doing. Now let's talk about the mantras. Mantras are abilities that you charge up, as you can see here. A nice animation above, and then it gives you spells to use. For the Guardian, and specifically the Firebrand, they get 3 charges of their mantras, with the final charge being a much stronger effect. So the very first charge of the spell is Restoring Reprieve. You heal yourself and pulse out Aegis to allies. You get this twice, and you also, on the final one, get to do the same thing, Aegis, but the heal is much stronger. So that's the second charge, because it does end up recharging itself. If we were to use Restoring Reprieve, much stronger. There's a very subtle ring effect that plays to show that it is the final spell, but it is a little bit more subtle. Next, we have Mantra of Flame, which just does a cone of fire damage, a little flat damage, but most importantly, burning. You get this twice, where you can shoot out 1 stack of burning per pulse, and then the final pulse is Flame Surge. one that does much greater burning damage, applying 3 stacks of burning. Mantra of Lore. Recite the ritual of cleansing, removing conditions and speeding recovery. This is your Condi clear mantra. It's much more supportive and is utilized in healing builds to apply great amounts of regen and also cleanse conditions from yourself and allies. So opening passage, which does some regen, as you can see here. It will also remove 2 conditions on 5 allies. And then we have Clarified Conclusion. This is a much stronger ability in terms of it does a longer regen and clears, and not only clears, but converts conditions to boons. 5 of them. I do love that ring effect. I wish it was a bit more prominent, but yeah. Next, we have Mantra of Truth. Prepare the tenets of truth to debilitate your foes. This is an ability. It's more so utility. It does a lot of conditions, but they're not necessarily damaging conditions. They're more debilitating and control conditions. So Mantra of Truth. Recount a truth to enemies in front of and around you, inflicting them with conditions. It's the same flat damage as Flame Rush, though this might be even a little bit better if it did like slightly more damage than Mantra of Flame, if it did like 500 instead of 400. But you apply Cripple, Weakness, and Blind. Nice yellow cone. Very rarely see this effect because I don't use it too much. And then we have Voice of Truth. We do the same thing, but instead we now apply 5 stacks of Vulnerability, Immobilize, Weakness, and Blinding for much greater durations. And that was Mantra of Truth. And then the final one we have Mantra of Potence. This charges a spell that applies quickness and might to yourself and allies. It's really that simple, but it's really, really strong. You get quickness and you get might. It means you can attack faster. Another stack. And the final one does 8 seconds of quickness and much greater stacks of might. 8 stacks of might. So you can do boom, boom, and get a total of almost 13 stacks of might with much longer durations in quickness. The Elite, we have Mantra of Liberation. You might be wondering, where was my stun break mantra? Well, they made the Elite mantra a stun break. And it really is worthy of an Elite if you just think about it. Just having a multi-tiered stun break. So we have Mantra of Liberation. This will apply stability and retaliation. Honestly, it's not super enthralling. You see a lot of this on the Tome of Courage, which we'll get to in a minute. But I guess it's fine. Stability is nice if I do say so. The retaliation might not even be needed. But you will break out of stuns applying stability and retaliation. Don't mind the quickness, that's a trait. So you'll do this again, and then you have finally Unhindered Delivery. Your whispers guard your allies, stabilizing and breaking stuns on them while weakening enemies. It says weakening enemies, but there is no weakening of enemies. It's only retaliation. I guess that could be weakening enemies, but it sounds like it would be a condition such as weakness. But do this, and then you get retaliation, stability, and swiftness. And even more stun breaks. In total, you get 3 stun breaks on a 25-second recharge. Actually, I forgot the virtues. Hold up. I forgot the virtues. We're going to go back. We had the virtues on the Core Guardian, but now we have the tomes. Tome of Justice. All the passives are still the same. You will now call forth a tome with 5 charges, granting you another, basically, weapon to use. You have 5 abilities. Spring Spell, which does a cone. One thing I will say about Guardian is I find it to be rather uninspired because you get so many cones. I mean, all of the mantras are cones. Your auto attack in tomes are cones. And they follow this basic same layout. You'll see in a minute. But this is your cone attack. Your second ability is your AoE burst. Igniting burst, damage, a lot of burning and weakness. Your third ability is your ground targeted AoE ability, which actually pulls enemies. Call forth a heated vortex to collapse your enemies together. All enemies, if there are any, will go to the center. You have your massive circular AoE, Scorched Aftermath, that will deal damage, bleeding, and burning. Really big ring. Probably too big in structured PvP settings, if I'm going to be completely honest. And then we have the final epilogue, Ashes of the Just. Recall the army of the fallen heroes, granting allies the searing blades of justice. This will put an effect on yourself and 5 allies, which allows you to deal burning for your next attack. So it's very similar to the core Virtue of Justice active ability, because when you activate Virtue of Justice, you give yourself and all others an effect on their next attack to burn enemies. So this, you'll get 3 stacks, so in total, 4 possible stacks of burning. So yeah, you can do quite a bit of burning with that ability in terms of quick fire. Oh, I think that might have been procced from a trait, but yeah, 3 stacks. And then we have Tome of Resolve, which basically does everything Tome of Justice did, but more supportively. Desert Bloom, healing. A conal attack that will heal. Then we have Radiant Recovery. This is your circular burst that will cleanse conditions and heal for each condition cleansed. Same animation. Third ability, same animation, different coloring. This will apply boons in an area instead of pulling. Your 4th grand circular AoE is Shining River. Just does a lot of healing over time and grants swiftness to allies as well as a water field. It's weird that they use a lot of water for Guardian, or for Firebrand, considering they're so much more in tune with light, but I guess it's still kind of light-ish. And then we have the epilogue. This will put an effect on allies, but instead of giving them a heal on their attack, it instead increases 33% of their healing effectiveness. It boosts their ability to heal and receive the healing. Basically just increasing the amount of healing that they receive, but on any other allies, they're also going to be getting healed. And then it will also convert conditions to boons, 5 of them. Nice Oasis effect. And then we have Tome of Courage. Does everything the last 2 tomes did, but more defensively and stabilizingly. So we have Unflinching Charge, which applies stability and swiftness on an autocast. Same coloring as Voice of Truth. And then we have Daring Challenge. As the tales recount of Tarai, taunt your enemies and also give yourself retaliation. Same effect. And then we have Valiant Bulwark. This is slightly different. Instead of having just boons or a pull, it will in fact create a bubble around the area. So at least this one, skill 3 on the F3, is different enough for me to kind of get behind it and enjoy it more so. And then we have the Grand AoE, Stalwart Stand, which applies resistance in an area, which is rather strong and a light field. And then we have Unbroken Lines. This epilogue must do the most. It recalls the memory of heroes past. Basically, it gives them an effect for 5 seconds, increasing their toughness by 300. It applies protection, stability, and Aegis to all allies as well. So that was the trait that led me to it, Swift Scholar. Then we have Imbued Haste. Gain increased attributes while affected by quickness. There is a lot of quickness going around, so while you have quickness, you're going to get more condition damage, healing power, and vitality. I actually never really noticed the vitality change because it used to be toughness, but it looks like they forgot to change the icon. But you do get minor increase in vitality, which is rather interesting. So the longer you have quickness up, the more condition damage you'll have, the more healing power you'll have, and the more vitality you'll have. So for the traits, we have Unrelenting Criticism. Axe skills gain a chance to inflict bleeding. Symbol of Vengeance now dazes on its initial strike. This is a really powerful trait, especially in PvP scenarios, because of the daze. The bleeding is very minor, which is kind of sad. And yeah, bleeding is kind of more of a condition that covers enemy targets, just in case if they happen to cleanse conditions. They might instead cleanse the bleeding rather than the burning, which is primarily what you want. But as everything, bleeding does help out a little bit. Next, Liberator's Vow. Grant allies quickness when you use your healing skill. This is interesting, and I really used to not like the middle tier because it was all about quickness, but it was all really boring. And that's probably one reason why Firebrand is a little meh in my eyes. It's very strong, so if you like to play strong things, there isn't enough variety to really satisfy my playstyle, per se. Next, we have Archivists of Whispers. Your virtues gain additional pages. As you can see here, we only have 5 tome pages if we select this trait. Now we have a grand total of 8, which means that we can now use 8 abilities of our tome instead of just 5. So we can cast one of those. We can spam one a couple times even. We can pop a bubble. We could do that. I honestly think tomes feel much better having a standard 8. So I oftentimes use Archivist of Whispers, except we have weighty terms. In all honesty, I don't often use this trait. But the final charge of your mantra skills inflict immobilization. Now you might remember that Voice of Truth already puts immobilization. I think all this does is it increases the duration of immobles, which it does. It goes from 2 to 3 and 3 and 3/4 of a second. So you're going to get much more immobilization time out of this. But if you want to play a very aggressive playstyle, say in PvP, weighty terms is very useful for applying a lot of immobilization on enemies, while also allowing your tomes to recharge much faster. Not tomes, I should say mantras, to recover faster. Next, we have Stalwart Speed. When you grant Aegis or Stability, grant Quickness. And the one reason why I kind of find these two traits to be basically the same thing is because, well, they're doing the same thing. These probably could honestly be one trait, and honestly be in line with many of the traits Guild Wars 2 has. But it's even more awkward because your healing skill applies Aegis. So you're getting quickness from using the healing skill, but you're also getting more quickness from doing the Aegis. It just feels like these should be one trait, and it also kind of feels like we're being gypped of a trait. Next, we have Legendary Lore, which I like, but it's okay. It's not too bad. I think there's definitely scenarios where people might want to use this. But tome skills gain bonuses from scribbling in the margins by ancient bards. This means that your abilities, while you have Tome of Justice on, you'll have 20% increased burning duration. Your abilities in F2 will now apply regeneration, which is kind of a meh thing, because regen does not stack in intensity. It stacks in whoever has it applies in duration and is applied by whoever has the most healing power. Now, if regen is rather stacked in intensity, meaning that it could go up to like 10 stacks of regen, that would be even more interesting and much more worthwhile. Now, as for Tome of Courage, your abilities will now apply protection on quite a lot of people, and is really, really great, especially with Stalwart Stand, if you want to be a very supportive and bolster the defenses of your team. Next, we have Stoic Demeanor. Stoic Demeanor recently got changed, and actually was changed in the way that I would have requested, and I think I did request. You now inflict burning and slow on foes you disable or immobilize. So this goes into the disabling with the axe and the immobilization of the mantras. So this used to only apply slow, which I think had a place, and I think could have been strong enough. But for Grandmaster, it just seems kind of underwhelming because slow is not a damaging condition, nor did this trait say, like, applying burning on a slowed enemy has increased duration by like 15% or something. That would have also been really interesting. But they just went with an easier solution and now have this trait to apply burning on top of the slow whenever you control an enemy. Next, we have Quickfire. Granting quickness to an ally also grants Ashes of the Just. This is the epilogue in F1, which allows people to apply burning. Now, you're going to be getting a stack whenever you apply quickness. So it's kind of like quickness, quickness, quickness. But this last one isn't really applying quickness. It's more so just adding something to the application of quickness. So you can see here that I have Quickfire. If I give myself quickness, I now gain a charge of Ashes of the Just, and this will also apply to allies as well. And then finally, we have Lore Master, which I really enjoy. Tome skills gain reduced recharge, so it's at 12 seconds. Now it's at 8 seconds. So you get to use your tomes your tome skills much more frequently. It's much more fast paced, but also you retain your virtue's passive effect while they are on cooldown. So there's no longer this idea of sacrificing a tome or like the original idea of sacrificing a virtue. You just get to use them and keep the passive effect. I think that this is a really strong Grandmaster, and I love that it's really simple, but very, very effective. And when paired with Archivist's Whispers and Legendary Lore, you could go with a full tome build. This is typically my supportive build that I run with Firebrand. Everyone, that is the Firebrand. I find Firebrand to be really fun if you want to play a conditioned playstyle. It definitely gives you a new method of playing as a support as well, with a more focused casting in terms of so many cones, so many area of effect, direct, close range cones, all the cones that you could want in life. Literally all of them. Yes, this was the Firebrand. Hello everyone, and for this little section I wanted to advertise and just showcase some builds that I like to run that just show the possibilities that you can achieve using Guardian. So first up we have some damaging things, damage styled gameplay. So for damaging you can run Zeal, you can run Radiance and Dragonhunter, or you could just do something more core where you run Zeal, Radiance, and Honor. Honor being for some more slight self-preservation and maybe some defenses, because even if you are playing damage, you want to make sure that you're still alive. Next up is a condition playstyle with Virtues, Radiance, and Firebrand, as Firebrand once again is really nice for condition playstyles. In the same vein, we have some support build with Virtues, Honor, and Firebrand. Virtues and Firebrand are quite malleable in terms of the playstyle that you want to be playing. Then for some defensive capability, you can run Valor, Honor, and Virtues for a core tanky support-ish build, or you can run Valor, Virtues, and Dragonhunter with some more self-defense. Thank you so much everyone for watching this. If there are any new players thinking about Guardian or their future with Guardian, I hope you have a blast, and remember to have fun and enjoy the playstyle that best suits you. There's a bunch of mixing and matching, from support builds with Honor and Virtues and Valor to Firebrand and Valor and Honor, and even damaging with Dragonhunter and Zeal and other utility skills. There's a lot that you can do with Guardian. And once again, thank you to my patrons, of course, for helping me make these videos. If you would like more of these videos or other videos in general at a faster rate, consider going over to my Patreon to get some rewards where you can request a video or play with me and others. I trust you guys, though. All my links are down below, from Twitter to Twitch to Patreon to PayPal. And I would love for you to leave a comment on one thing that you really enjoy about Guardian or something. And subscribe for more videos. Like, share, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, everyone. Mwah.